All right, Nick, let's talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide. And we're talking about recruiting. We're not talking about this year, though. We're not talking about the next year. We're potentially talking about down the road in the future. Alabama has been making waves in that department. I think this is really exciting for the recruiting game and Coach DeBoer as well. I'm Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, Alabama really getting on down the road in the recruiting game. I think this is absolutely fantastic for Coach DeBoer. Let's get on into the tweet from over on from Hayes Fawcett, a really great follow on Twitter. This one says, breaking. Elite 2027 linebacker Barack Willis has committed to Alabama. He tells me 4@On3 recruits. The 6'3", 230-pound linebacker from Moody, Alabama, chose the Crimson Tide over Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU. He says, blank. We all know the Alabama acronym there. But, Nick, I think this is really exciting for Alabama. First of all, this kid's huge for being a 2027 recruit. Already 6'3", 230-pound linebacker. I think this is great for Alabama in this recruiting class in the future. I'm curious what your thoughts on this one are, but before we get to you, Nick, Alabama fans, in the comment section below, we're talking about a future star, a young linebacker coming up through the high school ranks, potentially in the next couple of years, gonna make it to Alabama. Speaking of linebackers, who is your favorite Alabama linebacker of all time? I think there's a lot of really good options out there. A lot of guys made it to the league, but let us know who's your favorite Alabama linebacker of all time in the comment section below. But Nick, nonetheless, what do you think about this latest update for Alabama?
So first and foremost, as a big fan of NFL history, I'm going to say Leroy Jordan, great career with the Dallas Cowboys. As the great Paul Bear Bryant once said, if the runner is in bounds, Jordan will tackle him. Obviously, a great Crimson Tide player back in his day. I'm going Leroy Jordan to answer your question. Old school for you there. But let's talk about the future here and this big time commit for Coach DeBoer and the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I think it's a really smart move by Kalen DeBoer. And here's why. Obviously, Alabama has done a great job this offseason in terms of stemming the tide and really doing a great job in the recruiting game and in the transfer game as well. But the reality is, Coach DeBoer needs to understand, and he is, that there will be a point where the aura of the greatness that's kind of ebbing around this program because of what Nick Saban did will wane, right? Because obviously Nick Saban, an all-time great. Kalen DeBoer realistically probably won't be an all-time great like Nick Saban just because that's virtually impossible to do, right? So he has to understand that all the good energy and all the good vibes, that's a little afterglow from Nick Saban, right? That's still because it's Alabama, right? The 2-decade dynasty that the Crimson Tide were part of. He understands that, and he sits there and says, okay, I need to be proactive when it comes to future recruits. I can't sit here and just rest on Alabama laurels and let all these recruits come to me because I'm Alabama. That will ebb away because the Nick Saban aura will ebb away as well. It's just the way it works. And we've seen this with programs, great programs in the past. An all-time great coach leaves. I look at Bobby Bowden at Florida State. You look around and suddenly there's like a decade where Florida State's terrible because they sit there and say, well, we're Florida State. We're just going to get all kind of great recruits because we got great recruits for 25, 30 years. That's not how it works, right? If you don't have the aura of that great coach, that legend, you need to be active. You need to be proactive. You need to treat yourself as if you're the underdog. Alabama needs to recruit like they're Ole Miss, like they're Mississippi State, where they need to be recruiting freshmen and sophomores and going above and beyond, thinking of themselves instead of as the favorite, as a clear and undeniable underdog. And the fact that DeBoer aggressively went after a class of 2027 recruit, to me, is a sign that he gets it. He understands that as good a job as he's done this offseason, a big part of that is because of the Nick Saban effect still existing. That will go away. They need to replace it and treat themselves as the underdog to keep the recruits coming in. Because if they can keep that level of talent, that pipeline that's steady, right? They don't have that ebb, right? That happens all the time. You're a great program. You dip when the coach leaves. It's really hard to climb back up. If you can keep that steady and flat, and the only way you can do that is by being proactive, then you avoid that dip and you maintain consistent title winning seasons. Obviously, DeBoer has to prove it on Saturdays on the field, but what he's done with smart moves like this has been really impressive.
Yeah, Nick, and we did a story kind of on recruiting and new coaches a little while ago. I don't exactly remember what coach it was. I think it was Coach Elko, but that point isn't really that important. What was important is what was said about recruiting as a new head coach. It says when you first get there, you're already 2 years behind on that current recruiting class. And as far as the next year goes, talking about the 2026 recruiting class now, I guess it would be, you're already a year behind on that one as well. So what we're seeing from Coach DeBoer is he realizes that adage that the coach said is, 2 years behind, a year behind. Well, now he's getting ahead. He's going so far ahead that he's trying to get away from what you're talking about. When a coach really loses that influence, he kind of, after a couple of years of him being there, the Nick Saban effect will be gone. So he has to go ahead and get out in front of that. So that's why I think this move for 2027 recruit is so big. I think this is a great move by Coach DeBoer, especially getting a young guy out of the state of Alabama. You need to win that local battle first. And, early on, winning the local battle is probably pretty easy because, as you said, that Nick Saban effect, all of those guys that, in that Alabama area, everyone already still wants to play for Alabama. But 2027, for all intents and purposes, 3 years from now, nobody is going to remember what was going on with that Nick Saban Alabama. It's all going to be about how Coach DeBoer has done so far. So for him to make those inroads now, for him to get those pipelines started, I really love what he's doing. He's getting ahead of the game finally in recruiting, because the only way you can do that is jump out ahead, because you're already so far behind in those first two classes. I love that he's already putting attention on 2027. I think it shows he knows what's going on and he has what it takes to get this Alabama team where they want to be.